Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, I almost messed up doing that, ladies and gentlemen, because I was thinking about the Joe Biden press conference, and I was getting these gaps in my head saying, I hope I don't sound like Joe Biden. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I got great news for you, ladies and gentlemen. It's a good news, bad news kind of day. The good news is, if you're waiting for the weekend, you made it. It's here. It's Friday morning. I'm going fishing right after the show. Got my hair cut, so I'll be looking good out there for the fish when they come over the rail and everything else. So good news, the weekend is upon us. Bad news, ladies and gentlemen, is about the press conference, and I'm going to get into details of that in just a moment. Before we go any further, I got to tell you about our sponsors each and every day. Our main sponsor is Big Daddy Unlimited, otherwise known as BDU. Look above our show, no matter when or where you're watching it. You will see links to our sponsors, including Big Daddy Unlimited, your Second Amendment headquarters. I call them that because simply it's true, but they give you opportunities to buy guns and ammunition at factory direct pricing delivered directly to your door. They also have over 100,000 other related items, from swag right down to bulletproof vests, protective gear, survival gear, even knives, ladies and gentlemen. Anything that remotely is connected to the Second Amendment and your personal defense, you will find at Big Daddy Unlimited factory direct pricing. And they defend your Second Amendment literally on a daily basis by, for instance, supporting shows like JMT. Then we have patriotthreads.org, apparel with a purpose. They are a total fulfillment center when it comes to charity events. They can produce t-shirts as their main thing, but other types of gear directed to help you with the charities of your choice. For instance, if you're putting on a fishing tournament and you're trying to raise money for charity, they can produce a shirt for you, your organization, and they can ship it directly to wherever you want it and help with making sure that the profits go to the charity of your choice. Check them out. You have a 20% off code if you use the JMT, in other words, the initials of our show, JMT, 20% off, patriotthreads.org. Recoil TV, last but certainly not least, they are definitely a big part of what we're doing these days. They are also directly tied into the Second Amendment because they have their own YouTube channel. They also have a magazine you can get called Recoil Magazine, and it's all about guns, ammunition, tactical gear. They show you demonstrative videos about the latest products, those types of things. We have a channel on their YouTube channel where they archive our show. Of course, we also have our own YouTube channel, John Martin Talks. Spell it all the way out. We could always use more subscribers and views there. Well, let's get into this press conference. As I was telling you, we have some good news and bad news. The good news is you made it to the weekend. The bad news, ladies and gentlemen, I just got to tell you, and I don't say this with any joy in my heart, and it's not because Donald Trump is not in the White House, and it's not because Joe Biden per se is in the White House. It is because if you look at the gentleman that was up there giving that press conference yesterday, none other than Joseph Biden Jr., then I came to the conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a president of the United States. I'm not even talking about, we don't say the F word here about voter whatever. We call it mod here because we're trying to play by the crazy rules, these algorithms out there. So we don't say the F word here. So I'm not even talking about voter mod. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the actual person, win, lose, by hook, crook, whatever, that is Joe Biden. If that dude is actually the president, and I'm not saying he's not officially the president, what I'm saying is there's no way he can function as president. There is absolutely no way. I was talking to one of my producers before the show today, and I told him, I said, Joe Biden recently came out and talked about in his kind of little statement about the coronavirus that if we do the right things and everything, we might be able to celebrate the 4th of July at our own home, that kind of thing, with a limited number of people. Well, let's just fast forward and say you went to a 4th of July party. And your Uncle Joe, in this case Joe Biden, was there, and you hadn't seen him for a while, and you were, jawing with him and listening to him at the 4th of July party. When you got ready to go home with your wife or your brother or sister or whatever, wouldn't you probably say, man, old Joe, Uncle Joe has really slipped? I'm telling you right now, there's no doubt about it that if Joe Biden were a member of your family and you went to Thanksgiving or 4th of July, you would actually question what the heck is going on with Uncle Joe. He has really slipped. And it does my heart no joy to say it. While I was watching that press conference, and we're going to get into some of the details in just a second, but one thing, a song kept playing in my mind. I kept trying to tap it out of my head. It was Joe Diffie, who I think succumbed to COVID, unfortunately, this past year. But Joe Diffie, I think, is the guy where he has that song. I can't play these songs because you got to get permission, but I'll sing a ditty of it where he says, prop me up against the jukebox when I die. That's I kept saying. It kept ringing in my head the whole time Joe was up there, because it was literally like he'd had sand put in his boots and was propped up against the jukebox. It was just crazy. But he started out, first of all, he was a little bit late, which is not that big a deal. Presidents do that all the time. I mean, certainly President Trump was notorious for being late, right? But he made an opening statement. So we're going to talk about, that was probably the most coherent part of his entire press conference, because you know they were practicing. Let me make this point too before we get too deep. What we saw, and I talked about this the other day when Joe made his coronavirus proclamation or whatever. What we saw yesterday at the press conference is the best Joe Biden's going to be. He's not getting better. It's not like his next press conference is going to be a lot better. This is the best Joe Biden they have. I mean, because if I'm right about the fact that he's getting some type of dementia, Alzheimer, I'm sorry. Maybe I told you I'm worried about that it might be contagious coming through the screen on me. But if he's got any of those things, which it certainly appears that he does to me, and keep in mind, I work with elderly people all the time. I kept my mother at home until she died at 98. My wife is a home health care nurse, and she has her own agency, and I run administrative parts of it. So I deal with families mostly and not really directly with the clients too much, but I've seen a lot of it. So I'm not saying I'm a professional making a medical diagnosis, but my opinion algorithm is that Joe is slipping. And this is the best he's going to be. Keep in mind that they admitted from the White House that they've been prepping Joe for several days now for this. If you look, and I mentioned this during the week, Joe Biden's official schedule was one event or less a day for the last couple of weeks. So this is Joe Biden at his best. So his opening statement is probably the most prepared of anything he's going to be. And he first came out and gave himself credit for the fact that he is hoping within his first 100 days not to have 100 million shots in people's arms, but literally 200 million shots in people's arms. And did he thank President Trump? No. He actually attacked President Trump. I don't think he ever said the word Trump. He'd say my predecessor a couple of times, and we're going to get into a little of that. But the only reason that Joe Biden is able to accomplish whatever he's accomplished with the vaccine is because Donald Trump actually spearheaded the Warp Speed Project, which looks to be, whether you're pro-vaxxer or not or whatever, looks to be a tremendous success. So he talked about that without giving Donald Trump one iota of credit. Then the one thing that really jumped out in his opening statement is how he started talking about his goals for opening up schools. Remember that the reason why the schools, now they've been open up in places like Florida, we've been open all year. We've been regular school year this year, and without really many, if any, incidents. But in the places like, say, California, Chicago, New York, where the schools have been closed, it's not because of COVID. It's because of teachers' unions. It's the teachers' unions that have kept the schools closed. And he made it sound like because he passed this $2 trillion deal through Congress that all of a sudden he's now going to get credit for opening schools, which, by the way, they're still not open. And we only have what? A couple of months left in the school year. So he's talking about that. Makes no sense whatsoever. And then he starts talking about the economy and how there's some good economic numbers coming out. It's a mixed bag in general, but there's some good economic numbers coming out. And if you remember, President Trump actually said that 2021 was going to be a great year for the economy. And I think it would be going even more so had he actually been still in the White House. But the thing about it, once again, the reason why our economy is even existing is because of states like Texas and my great state of Florida. And of course, there are others like Georgia and everything else. And I'm not trying to leave anybody out, but there are states, primarily, to be honest with you, in the South that have stayed open, or at least attempted to stay open at some measure since the beginning of this. Never really totally shut down like California, New York. And think about what our economy would actually be doing if places like Chicago, if places like the entire state of California, if places like New York City were up and running like they have been in Texas and Florida. So, he's taking a lot of credit for stuff that he actually, because he himself would have shut Florida and Texas down a long time ago. So then he starts getting into the question. So he spent the first 5 minutes or so and not really attacking him, just really literally read. I mean, this dude, if you go and look at the presser, is literally like this reading most of the time. He's rarely even looking up. I mean, to the point that even a guy like Mike Wallace on Fox News commented he'd never seen a president do this before. And he mentioned Ronald Reagan, who was accused of having some slippage there due to age. And he said, Chris Wallace said he never saw Ronald Reagan just literally read verbatim from notes. It's one thing to refer to them. It's another to just sit there and read. But he talked about, right off the bat, unity and how he was trying to bring unity. And I was thinking about it. He was talking about the Republican voters. He mentioned this several times, that Republican voters, he wasn't even talking about like elected congressmen and women. He said Republican voters are behind him. Based on what? No one even questioned that. And remember, when they start talking about unity, he blamed the Republicans a little bit, but the Democratic Party stated with pride that they were the resistance party all over the country when Donald Trump got elected. Right here where I live, basically our entire county commission and the city commission of the major city here, Gainesville, Florida, literally came out and said they were members of the resistance. The mayor of our little town here of Gainesville, Florida, of course I live in Hawthorne, actually came out and said that he supported Antifa. A full-blown support of Antifa. So this idea that the Republicans somehow are like opposing Biden in some kind of large way, I wish that it were true. To me, I'm worried that they're going to cave as soon as they can, but that's what. But to actually talk about the Republicans holding up his agenda, when, as I say, the Democratic Party actually stated that they were the party of resistance. I've talked about this before, but if I say it, it bears repeating. Mitch McConnell, you may recall, got blasted when Obama first got elected. He said one of his goal was to make Obama a one-term president. And he was called everything but a child of God, racist and everything. He didn't say he didn't want him to be not a president, just didn't want him to get reelected. The Democrats basically did not want Donald Trump to have a one term, not even have a full term. They were impeaching the dude from the time he walked up the dadgum steps to get inaugurated. So, I mean, this unity deal just beats me up. I get crazy about this, okay? So I took some notes about this, and I'm not going to go over I think he took maybe 10 questions and 3 or 4 follow-ups on each question. 10 different people, I believe, is what actually asked him questions. No conservatives, by the way. But the first question, and it was interesting how they asked these questions. And I didn't write down all these people's names. But the first question, this woman got up and she said, you got elected because you were a moral, decent man. That was her preference of her question. You are a moral, decent man. And then proceeded to ask him questions about the border. And in fairness, he was taxed a little by that. I mean, there were some questions that came out, like whether or not you're going to actually show us the the actual places where people are being stacked up like cordwood down there. Are you going to just cherry pick the place? He was kind of asked that. He didn't do a very good job of answering that. He essentially said that he would be transparent once he got everything in place, which, is like the opposite of transparent, right? But this woman asked a question, prefacing it by saying, you got elected because you were a moral, decent man. Now, Biden's response to some of these questions about the border, one of the ones that jumped out at me right off the bat, he said that the border surge that we're having right now is normal. It's seasonal. It basically has to do with the weather and everything else. Nothing to do with his policies like we talked about yesterday, open border and a welfare state. Nothing to do with people actually saying that the reason they're coming here, and go back and check out our show from yesterday. The best way to look at our podcast is probably go directly to our YouTube channel, spell it out, look at it, John Martin Talks. You can also go to America's Voice News, by the way. I don't talk about them near enough, but they're an excellent choice if you want to make a choice other than the mainstream media. America's Voice News. Now, we don't have a live show on there at the moment, but if you go on their streaming service, which is Roku, Fire Stick, Apple TV, of course, they have free apps on your Android or your iPhone. They're on channel 219 Dish Network and the Pluto channel. But if you go on their streaming service and you look under their shows tab, click on that, you will see our show archived there on a daily basis in 15-minute segments, basically. So check it out, America's Voice News. But Biden said that this surge was normal, which is an absolute flat-out lie. Now, he said 2 or 3 things in this that were just blatant lies that he was never challenged on. This press conference was the most rehearsed event I've ever seen. I mean, I have no doubt that, the way they were calling on people, it was painful to watch. I'm telling you, as I said, I'll probably repeat it again, we don't currently have a president of the United States. I don't know if Kamala's making decisions. I have a suspicion it's Barack Obama that's making decisions based on some of the things I've seen. But it ain't Joe Biden making the decisions. I would be willing to bet you money on that because I don't think the man can make decisions. He couldn't handle this. And as I said earlier, this is the best he's going to be. And this is with a week or 2 weeks worth of preparation. And he looked like a deer in the headlights on numerous occasions. He never had any pep in his step whatsoever. But he said the border surge is normal, which is a lie. He also said that I'm having a Biden moment myself, but I'm willing to admit it, right? He also blamed Donald Trump for basically everything. He said that the children weren't coming here because he was a nice guy, and more children are going to come. If he talked about how he literally addressed the idea that children can stay. Oh, and this is the point I wanted to make. He actually said that more people were being apprehended and sent back to Mexico than were being allowed to come in, which is just a lie. Maybe it's a factual error on his part. But people are flooding across the border. Even the liberal media has had to address that idea. You can't hide it anymore. But Biden literally stood up there and said more people are being deported back than are staying here, which is just a lie. He was literally called out on that within minutes by several media networks, not just like Fox News. But more children are absolutely going to come because he literally said in his press conference, and I kid you not, that adults and entire families are being sent back. But children, unaccompanied children, we're taking in. It's just, and let me just tell you something I said the other day. Children don't come here by themselves. You can't tell me that 10-year-olds are leaving Guatemala, coming all the way across Mexico and into Texas or California or Arizona totally by themselves. That's not happening. And he did mention that they have telephone numbers wrapped around their wrists and stuff, and that these numbers are now being called and the people are sent to their parents. So you're telling me that their parents are already here and the children just been hanging out in Guatemala? It's so much nonsense. But then he talked about a little bit about the filibuster. That they went back and forth on that. It came up a couple of different times. And he essentially said that he is for doing away with the filibuster for this new election law that we've been talking about for the past week, this SB1 or S1 that basically federalizes election. And I told you yesterday, let me repeat that. There is one piece of legislation that we cannot allow to become law, either through the Senate and the House signed by Biden, which if it passes, he will do. There's no question. It's got to be stopped at Supreme Court level. If that bill actually passes and becomes the law of the land, this federalizing of elections, then it's over. It's over. I don't know what we'll do after that. I'm hoping it don't happen. Maybe we'll have a show afterwards, but it's over because you could talk about whether or not Donald Trump's going to run in 2024 and everything else. It won't matter who runs in 2024 because their election, the mod, if you will be codified into law. That bill cannot be allowed to pass. But what I think they're going to do, and I've been watching Schumer and now, of course, Biden yesterday at the press conference, they're setting it up so they want things like some of the gun control bills to be knocked down. They don't really have a problem with them getting knocked down, not passing filibuster. They want Republicans to filibuster a bunch of major issues, and then they're going to want them to filibuster this election issue. Then they're going to come back and play the race card. That's what's going to happen. And basically, you keep hearing this term Jim Crow. I've heard the word Jim Crow more in the last couple of days than I have in the last couple of decades. And yes, I know what Jim Crow laws are in the South. And they were put there by Democrats, but that's another story. But they're setting up to do away with the filibuster in the name of racial injustice. That's what it's all about. They're setting it up. But Biden literally had a mental breakdown during this point. I don't have any video to give you because at the time of writing this show, I really didn't have a chance to get any out because it was so new. But go back and look at it. Maybe we'll play some next week a little bit, play some snippets. But Joe Biden, during this discussion of the filibuster, lost it. I mean, he was literally like, the worst thing in the world, dead air. I mean, I'm not even talking about mumbling. He got to a point where he didn't know what to do. He didn't have the proper note. But he literally also said this about Donald Trump, and no one challenged him. I heard some people on like Fox News and other media sources challenging more conservative sources. But none of the people asked a follow-up question about this. Donald Trump, Joe Biden said that Donald Trump allowed children to starve to death because he sent them back to Mexico. No evidence of this. No evidence. So think about that. He is saying, love, hate, whatever, Donald Trump. He's saying that Donald Trump allowed Mexican children, Guatemalan children, Hispanic children to starve to death. He said that from the White House. And he implied that by its very nature, if we're sending them back, that Mexico's president allowed that. He didn't say that, but that's the implication, right? But he flat out said that Donald Trump allowed children to starve. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a lie. I don't believe that. I'm not saying children didn't starve. Might have happened. But to insinuate that the president of the United States knowingly allowed children to starve at our southern border, it is a lie. I don't see any emaciated children there. If anything, I see people saying, how did that gal walk all the way from Guatemala? I'm not trying to body shame, far be it from me. But he said that from the White House, that Donald Trump allowed children to starve, and no one questioned that. And he's also basically said that he's willing to pay people to stay in their countries. He talked about how when he was vice president, that he wouldn't give money to foreign governments. He would just hire contractors, probably through his brother or his son. Oh, and by the way, not one single question about Hunter Biden or anything to do with the Biden crime family. There's a story out in Politico, I think it came out late yesterday, about Hunter Biden. I don't know the exact time frame of this, but it's just breaking. We don't have time to really talk about it much, but let me give you a couple of details. This is in Politico, by the way, so it's hardly a right-wing publication, where they said there was an incident when Hunter Biden, and I think it was his wife, but it might have been his girlfriend, they got in some kind of argument, and she had a pistol that was his, and she threw it in the trash can near a grocery store right by a high school, and went back to try to get it, and the gun was gone. Well, fast forward, apparently the Secret Service, now this was back after, like in 2018 when Biden wasn't under Secret Service protection, but supposedly the Secret Service went to the gun shop owner and wanted to see the paperwork on this gun that Biden had purchased. Turns out that Hunter Biden lied on the application when it came to the idea whether he'd had any drug issues or what, when we know he was kicked out of the Navy for cocaine and other things. He answered no on that, which is a felony, by the way. So they asked to see this paperwork and to take possession of it, and the gun store owner rightfully said, no, you don't have jurisdiction. This is alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, which came later that day or that evening and looked at it. I don't know if they made copies or whatever, but it turns out that Hunter Biden lied about this. This is in Politico now. But not one question was asked about any of this kind of stuff. Can you imagine if that was in a Trump deal and it was Don Jr. that actually had something? Oh my God, that would be the only thing they would even ask. It would be blah, 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 around the clock like the Charlie Brown. Wah, 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 wah. That would all it would be, man. But Joe Biden, I just had to point out that he got no question about. Another thing that jumped out at me was about, because they talked quite a bit about the border, but they didn't ask one question about COVID. I don't think there was even a question about COVID-19, the vaccines or anything. Biden made some statements at the beginning, but when you think about what's happening at the border, this is why I say they don't even believe their BS. Because if COVID-19, and I'm not saying it's not, I've told you, I've already dealt with it myself, man. I thought it was going to take me out. And I'm glad to have a full week back now and a couple of days on top of that. I feel very, very blessed. So I'm not downplaying the threat of COVID whatsoever. But if COVID-19 is the threat to this nation that Biden literally ran his campaign on, then how can you allow, there's some statistics, now I've been quoting you the statistic about 7% of the people tested coming across the border, and they're not testing everybody by any stretch, are testing positive. And they're being released without even being quarantined right in the United States. There are reports that is in some groups of people, as many as 50% have tested positive. I'm not making that statement. I'm simply telling you what's out there and what's reported. I don't know if that's true or not. I do believe the 7% figure is fairly accurate. It's been in the New York Times, so it's got to be real, right? But there was not one question about the threat of COVID and the super spreader event, basically, which Joe Biden, I remind you, said is just normal. This surge is just normal. It happens every year, no doubt about it. Then why do we have FEMA down there, Joe? Nobody asking that. But he's going to pay people. One of his plans, he talked about Kamala Harris is going to do that. She's the new czar, basically, of the border. Going to pay people not to leave their country. So we're going to pay people to stay at home. Might be cheaper, actually. But he also said something interesting, and no one seemed to pick up on this. I didn't even hear coverage of this on like Fox News or any of the other publications. But he said that he was going to do what Obama did on the border, basically. He referenced that. He literally said, because he was searching, he was grasping for something to say, and he said, yeah, we're essentially going to do what we did during the Obama administration, which was what? Put people in cages. I don't know. It's just crazy. But then they ask him a question. Let me check my time. We're doing pretty good. I'm not going to get to every question. But they ask him a question about the forever wars, principally in Afghanistan. And this is when, like, Mike Wallace even referred to this. I kid you not, when Joe Biden, he must have known that question was coming. He wasn't like he could answer it like I'm talking to you right now. I can recall what happened yesterday better than he can recall from the minute he's in. He literally picked up his paper. He almost put it in front of his face, but he had it here. And he read statement after statement after statement about the Afghan wars. His answers were written down. And he said his only real coherent answer on that is that we will not stay there a long time. We've already been there almost 20 years. And then he literally said the troops should be out by next year. He said, I would expect them to be out by next year. But he had to have that written down. Can you imagine having to have written down that you want to bring the troops home by next year? I mean, it's just crazy. But he was pressed a little bit more on these facilities. I kind of mentioned it earlier. And he said that he would not commit to letting the press see these facilities until he had his plan totally in place, until he'd made the improvements. He flat out lied about Trump slowing illegal immigration. He said Donald Trump didn't slow it down at all. This was just normal. And he was asked, I'm going to fast forward a little bit. He was asked about North Korea. And he was reminded that President Obama told incoming President Trump that North Korea, he thought, was the number one issue. That's what Obama said. And President Trump, to his credit, responded accordingly. But when Biden was asked about that and even referenced that portion I just talked about, he literally gave no answer at all. I mean, he goes, yeah, it's a problem, blah, blah, blah. I mean, if you go back and listen, he said nothing of substance about North Korea at all. But he agreed that it was a severe, a major problem. He talked about voting rights. And this is where he was literally waiting for that question. This is about that, what I tell you, I think they're going to use to try to overcome the filibuster. He called it sick that states were actually doing what is their constitutional right, and I would add on their duty, to set election laws in their state. That's what the Constitution said. He called that sick. And he kept saying the word Jim Crow, Jim Crow. He said it's almost like Jim Crow's now Jim Eagle, whatever the heck that means. But if you've noticed lately that the Democrats are saying they get certain talking points. Right now it's Jim Crow, Jim Crow, Jim Crow. Most people don't even know what Jim Crow is. But they're actually passed because they're trying to set up this voting rights issue, this federalization of our elections, as a racial equality or equity issue, which are two different things. That's what they're trying to set up, and they want to make it, they're trying to set it up so that if you oppose doing away with the filibuster, that you are a racist. Keep in mind, he mentioned how the filibuster had been dramatically overused in the last few years, and he went back and cited a time when it was all Democrats. If you go back and look at Joe Biden's timeline, it was the Democrats that were using the filibuster time and time and time again to stop Donald Trump. It wasn't the Republicans using it. Now, I would, if we had done away with the filibuster a few years ago, I wouldn't probably have a problem with it. I got some issues with it in general. I don't like the idea of the filibuster the way it currently is. But I don't like the idea of changing it just depending on who happens to be at the office at any given moment, which is all they're doing. They don't give a dadgum about the filibuster other than the fact that they're trying to use it as a club to beat up and the progressive take. Here's my deal. I keep telling you this. I'm going to say, here's the deal. My main political goal right now is to stop the progressive takeover of this great nation. That's it. And I don't care if you're running for dog catcher or the White House. That's my criteria. And the filibuster right now, to be honest with you, whether I like it or not, I'm just going to be straightforward with you. We need it to stop the progressive takeover of America. Because if that election bill passes and stands up to constitutional muster, which I don't think it will, and I've been surprised already, if it passes and holds up, we're over. But he did say, interestingly enough, and I was surprised they even asked him this question, but Biden said that he was planning to run for re-election. You know, there's all this talk about him not even finishing out his first term. He said he's going to run for re-election. Think about it. Biden's got it made, man. He's not the president. I know he's the duly elected, whatever. There's no mod involved in it. But Joe Biden, his agenda, as I've been telling y'all for the last few weeks, Joe Biden's agenda was simply to become president. He has succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. Joe Biden is not calling the shots. Tell me, honestly, watching it, I don't care if you love, hate Donald Trump, whatever, Joe Biden. Can you honestly believe that Joe Biden, the guy we saw yesterday at that press conference, is actually calling the shots? Really? make the case, because I just don't believe it. I'm not trying to say conspiracy. I'm just saying I don't think that man I saw yesterday is capable of actually functioning as the president of the United States. I just don't believe it. But he said Republicans agreed with him. He didn't put any evidence, and he kept talking Jim Crow, and he was asked about the filibuster one more time, and like I say, he just went blank. And they asked him when he was talking about this idea of running against Donald Trump. He said, or running for president again. Asked, would you run against Trump? He said, I don't know. He said, I don't even know if there'll be a Republican Party. That was just like, whoop, it just went on by. He said he didn't even know if there'd be a Republican Party, I guess, in 4 years. And hey, if they go the route, if they keep caving into Democrats, he may be on to something there. But he started talking a little bit about the federal budget. And this is the one area where I agreed with him. Now, I didn't agree with what he was talking about the money for, but he basically said he was shocked that Republicans all of a sudden now care about the budget. And on that point alone, I agree with him. There has been, no one seems to care about the budget and the deficit. They talk a little bit about it, but what the heck does either party actually do about it, including my beloved Donald Trump? What did he do about the deficit? Not much. As I've been telling you, we're addicted to government money. So on that one area, I got to give credit where credit is due. I think Biden is right to point out that, they don't seem to care about the budget when they're spending it like crazy. And I agree with him on that. But the main thing that he did, his strongest point, and Biden, let me check my time, a few minutes left. Double check it. The strongest point that Biden made, all eyes are fading a little bit, was his political platitudes. Whenever he was pushed in a corner, he rescued himself with time-honored political platitudes, talking about something like, what his daddy taught him and all that. That was his strongest point. And you could tell he fell back on that time and time again. Now, the part, and I'm not going to get into all this, but the part where he talked about China was really interesting. He talked about China. He said that no world leader knew Xi, president of China, better than him. And he pointed out that they've been knowing each other for 20 years, even back when they were both basically vice presidents. He pointed out that he had a 2-hour-long conversation with Xi when Xi called to congratulate him, with just him and his interpreters on both sides. Can you imagine talking to Joe Biden for 2 hours? Can you imagine that dude who literally was looking at his watch while he was up there and saying, I'm about out of time here, could have a 2-hour-long conversation? I don't know, man. But he said he was not, when it came to China, he said he was not looking for confrontation. He said that he wanted to, his big threat to hold China in line was to do more research here in our country, in our campuses and all, which I don't disagree with him. But China has infiltrated our campuses. There's such things called these Confucian Institutes. There's actually been a number of professors who've actually been arrested now for being spies, basically, for China. So I'm not so sure that is. But the one thing he kept talking about over and over and over, and he talked about this at his town hall meeting about a month ago, was China's values. That each country had to live by their own set of values. And he didn't go quite as far as he did in that town hall meeting, talking about cultural differences or cultural norms. But he essentially did say that China had different values, and to his credit, a little bit of credit for him, he said when those values conflict with our values that we're going to call them out on it. We'll have to wait and see about that. But see, here's something they talk about, like prejudices against Asian people, against Chinese people in particular. To me, you have to separate the Communist Party of China from Chinese in general. Because to me, if you're saying that people who are Chinese, even those who still live in China, which is over a few billion, right? If you actually say that those people support the values of what's happening to the Uyghur Muslims, to me, that is a racist statement. Because I still don't believe that the average Chinese person, whether they're certain, Chinese Americans, maybe a different category, but I have a hard time believing that if they know what's happening in China, that the Chinese people support harvesting of people's organs, support forced sterilization, support raping women with electrical prods and torturing them. I just find it hard to believe they do that. So, and he also accused Donald Trump, he had to mention Trump, of walking, and this was in context, keep in mind, with China. He accused Trump of walking away from American values. Now, if anything, Donald Trump, and maybe he should have done more. I'm not saying maybe he should have, but I don't know of any president in my lifetime that has got in the face of China and put our values up front against them than Donald Trump. It dadgum sure didn't lean me up against the jukebox Joe Biden prop me up when I die. He dadgum sure is not going to be able to take on China. If you believe that I'm wrong, just tell me, please. I'll have a little discussion with you. Tell me that guy that you saw yesterday can stand up to China. There is no way. And then he started talking about that it was autocracy versus democracy. In other words, China was an autocracy and we're a democracy, and we have to challenge them with our values. I don't disagree with that statement in general, but when you actually, and no one questioned him on this. This is what pisses me off. When you look at him making that statement, how can you not ask him that one of the definitions of autocracy is monolithic rule, when one person has all the power? Well, what has Joe Biden essentially done since he's been president? He's basically ruled by decree, autonomous decree. And no one even points out that to him. I mean, this thing was a total fabrication. And then with gun control, he gave the most idiotic but probably truthful answer that he could give, because they asked about gun control and the shootings at Atlanta and the shooting out in Boulder. And they asked him a series. He was kind of stumbling on it. So the reporter kind of rescued him and listed 4 or 5 different things about gun control, including the liability law, which, by the way, is ludicrous. It would make gun manufacturers liable for their misuse of their product. That's like, for instance, saying that Ford Motor Company, I'm not trying to pick on Ford, but they just popped in my head, and I have an F-150. I have a Ford, a Chevy, and a Toyota, by the way, and a Plymouth Dodge. I guess I'm spreading the wealth around. That's my wife's car. But it would be like saying Ford has, if you buy an F-150 pickup truck and you get drunk behind the wheel and drive it and kill somebody, that it's Ford that's responsible for that because you decided to drink and drive in a truck you purchased from them. That's basically what this liability gun law would do. So if you're a Second Amendment person, you better get woke, because Joe's answer to that, when this reporter read this laundry list of gun proposals, said, which one would you be supportive of? He said, all of the above. All of the above, man. That was his answer. He was deer in the headlights till that reporter rescued him. And then he talked about infrastructure. He talked about, I think in Pittsburgh next week, he's going to release his plan. But he said that's his next big priority. And then he read from a laundry list of things. He even mentioned that there are roads now that are 3 feet below sea level. I don't know where those are. Maybe in the bayou. I don't know. Nobody questioned that. But he talked about this laundry list of issues, and I'm not saying they're not real, but no one pointed out to him that, Joe, you've been up here for 47 years. And some of these things you talk about, ancient bridges, what have you done for the last 50 dadgum years that all of a sudden now you're president and it's going to change? No one asked that. So to me, and we'll kind of close up with this, this press conference was the most rehearsed conference thing I've ever seen. I don't know if they planned it out. It looked that way. If we had a legitimate press, and keep in mind there were no conservative outlets like Fox News, like Peter Ducey was one of the people that was supposed to ask questions, never got a chance. Not one question from a conservative source. But if we had a legitimate press and a person gave a talk like Joe Biden did yesterday, they would tear him apart. Just rip him apart, because it was total nonsense to the point of being really kind of sad. But it's scary because he is the president, whether you like it or not. He is the president currently in the Oval Office, in the White House. And the people around the world, including our arch enemies, are looking at this dude, and they got to be a bit perplexed. It's a dangerous thing, because Joe Biden is not in charge. He's just not. I don't see how it's possible for a guy to be in charge and be like the guy we saw yesterday. I don't think it. And I got a couple of videos we're going to close out with here. I have to agree. I've played this before. This was back when Joe Biden was still in his basement running, I guess, the greatest campaign in the history of presidency. This is Terry McAuliffe, former chair of the nationwide Democratic Party, former governor of Virginia, and former henchman for the Clintons. So this guy has been around. And he says that this is the best way to get Joe Biden elected. Check it out.
People say all the time, oh, we got to get the vice president out of the basement. He's fine in the basement. 2 people see him a day, his 2 body people. That's it.
I mean, they better put old Joe back in the basement. I mean, this is the best he's going to be, ladies and gentlemen. I keep saying, but it's scary. It scares me. I want to play. If you haven't seen Joe Biden's presser, I want you to look at it and then come back later and look at this video. You could pick a dozen different ones, but this video of Donald Trump during the 2020 campaign, a snippet from one of his rallies, and compare these two. Whether you like either one of them or not, it's not relevant to me. But tell me what we've lost, and you tell me where this guy in the White House, I'm not even talking about policy, could hold a candle to this man.
Biden's plan will destroy 5 million jobs, eliminate $2.6 trillion in wealth, and hurt lower and middle-income families the most of all. I will deliver optimism, opportunity, and hope. Biden will deliver pessimism, poverty, and decline. For the last 47 years, Joe Biden has been outsourcing your job, opening your borders. Oh, by the way, our border is closed. That's why you never hear about it. You ever notice you don't hear about that? You don't hear about our vets anymore because we take such good. Remember, every night you'd hear about vets. Before me, 91% approval rating with our vets. Our vets voted 91%. We never had anything like it. And sacrificing American blood and treasure in endless foreign wars in countries that you've never even heard of.
That's
and they're all coming back.
That's good. I mean, yes, I answered the question, do we miss you yet, DJT? No question about it. But the dude we saw yesterday in the White House, you could hate Donald Trump all you want, but he couldn't hold a candle to that. Couldn't hold that man's jockstrap. Now, I'm going to play one last video. It's kind of funny in a way. It's frightening in another way. Does my heart no joy to do it. But if Joe Biden is actually running the show from the White House, we know exactly how it's going to end. Right here it is. That's it right there, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be a train wreck for our nation. And man, I hope we can somehow survive it. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Hope you have a great weekend. I'm going fishing as soon as I can get out this studio. Winding them in, I'll tell you all about it Monday. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. I'm going to add one thing. I actually pray for Joe Biden right now. I'm not being Pelosi. I'm being serious because that man is in trouble, and he's up there. I don't know what to say more than that. Let's pray for this great nation because, boy, she deserves it, and my God, she needs it. But above all else, like I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.